morning, everyone, and welcome. Just a quick reminder to please mute your microphones when you're not speaking so that we have less interference. And welcome. My name is Vanya Stienius. I'm a criminologist and senior project manager working with IPRS, although I am connecting remotely from Sweden. So we have smart working. And just as a quick welcome today, as you all know, we're here to talk about how youth sports can serve as a prevention tool, an instrument for reducing radicalization, extremism among youth. And most specifically, today we want to look at the impact of COVID-19, which of course has had a significant effect on all of our lives and more had on youth. How has it changed their participation in sports? And what significance or meaning does it have for the tools or methods that are used in trying to ensure radicalization prevention? And I think that takes care of all our initial housekeeping issues. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Alessia Mafalopoulos. She's a senior project manager at IPRS, and she will present the project, Safe Zone project to you. Alessia?
Thank you, Vana. Buongiorno. Welcome, everybody. Sorry, just to switch. Yeah. I will present briefly Safe Zone project. As you know, this seminar is one of three transnational seminars that we are organizing within this project. This project Safe Zone is funded by the European Commission Internal Security Fund Police within the DG Migration and Home Affairs. It has a duration of 2 years, and it started in January 2020. And it involves 7 partners from 4 countries, European countries. Germany, Portugal, Slovenia, and Italy. This project is based on the consideration that radicalization and extreme violence are nowadays serious challenges and demanding for coordinated efforts that should involve all actors that play a role in the education of youth. Now, sports can also play a key role. They do play a role in the education of youth, and they can play a key role within this framework as sports contribute to guaranteeing the well-balanced psychosocial development of the children and young people. Nevertheless, coaches and trainers are not necessarily aware of their role and functions, nor do they know how to contribute to the educational needs of young people. In response to this lack of awareness, Safe Zone intends to address the needs to empower coaches and educators in sports in order to strengthen their educational relationship with young people and sensitize them over the need to identify the risks of youth radicalization to extreme violence. Why sports? There are many reasons for this. Some of these are that sports represent a key component of the lives of millions of children and adolescents today, with many of them participating in some forms of sports. Then participation in sports is also seen as a means for children to develop interpersonal and social skills and develop bonds with role models who have the capacity both to observe children and develop and influence their development. And coaches, sport coaches and educators are, of course, in a key position for this. They are in a key position to observe and potentially influence children's development. Sports, additionally, represent an effective area of informal education. They are a means to build resilience and to increase life skills, and they are an ideal context to reach out to a broad population of youth, supporting social inclusion and playing a role in identifying risks. Sporting groups have the potential to offer strong protective factors against radicalization. So these are just, let's say, the main factors making sport an ideal environment to identify risks of radicalization. Then why did we choose to target primarily sport coaches? Because coaches' potential is a positive influence. Let's say coaches can have they do have a very strong influence on children and adolescents, and they can direct this influence so as to have it positive in the lives of young athletes. Sport coaches develop the power of positive role models. Sport is based on the construction of relationships and bonds that go beyond performance or winning. These relationships can be powerful forces in protecting adolescents from radicalization. And finally, studies demonstrate that strengthening the role between coach and athlete, the relationship between coach and athlete can result in terms of performance as well as in terms of the child's development. So what does our project do? It engages and trains coaches, considering them as prevention agents in fighting youth radicalization and violent extremism, as we said. It creates an e-learning toolkit and training methodology for use throughout the European countries. It establishes an early warning monitoring reporting system for use within youth sports, and it increases awareness amongst local and national stakeholders and policy makers about the need for prevention of violent extremism and radicalization. It also strives to promote European and national policy development via exchanges and the development of European guidelines. The key principles of our methodology are three. We have awareness raising plus creating an alert system, the centrality of sport coaches and educators, and multi-agency cooperation. So we already said about the key role of sport coaches and educators. Let's see, regarding awareness raising. We do awareness raising with, of course, sport coaches and educators, as we said, and with other local stakeholders, such as school teachers, families, and possibly the police, and with local and national policymakers, raising the awareness about the need for prevention of violent extremism and radicalization. The creation of an alert system involves primarily sport organizations and sport clubs and managers from these sport clubs. It involves them through a series of meetings, national meetings, in the development and implementation of radicalization prevention policies, practices, and procedures, and we try to help them, let's say, to support them in developing clear and country-specific early warning procedures, practices, and policies for use by coaches and youth workers. We also provide, as I said before, coaches and youth educators involved in sports with the capacity and knowledge to support general radicalization prevention, identify signs of radicalization, and take appropriate actions. And finally, multi-agency cooperation, which is intended here as let's say, a framework, a system in which information can be shared. And this is held to be crucial for identifying and dealing with violent radicalization amongst young people in the sports. Multi-agency cooperation is also key to public protection and a strategy for safety, as it allows to maximize effectiveness of a joint risk assessment, information sharing, and shared decisions making. It also promotes cooperation between the various actors and stakeholders at local, national, and European level. It promotes the development and implementation of common prevention projects and strategies, especially at local level, and the inclusion of coaches and youth workers in youth sports into a broader network with law enforcement and other key stakeholders. Finally, our final slides, the main outputs of SafeZone project. We'll have the e-learning platform with a training toolkit in English and in the national languages of the countries involved. We'll have a prevention through sport booklet, which will be addressed to the general public as well, and European guidelines addressing particularly key stakeholders and policymakers at local, national, and European level. And this is all. Thank you. This is the website of the project, and enjoy the seminar.
Okay. Thank you, Alessia. I would now like to introduce Pedro Bolgado, excuse me. He's going to be speaking about sports as a key tool for the prevention of youth radicalization and violent extremism. Pedro Bolgado is the chair of the Working Party on Sport and the Youth Working Party during the Portuguese presidency of the EU. He's the attaché for youth and sport at the Portuguese permanent representation to the EU, and he has had this position since last September. Before that, he served as director of the youth department of the Portuguese Institute of Sport and Youth, and he is a former senior officer of the Portuguese Ministry of Home Affairs. Pedro, where are you?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, welcome.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and let me start by thanking you for this kind invitation to join you today and for the opportunity to address such a relevant topic. Let me just start by trying to share my screen and my presentation. Give me just a few seconds, please, if you don't mind. I think you can all see it now. Yes. Very well. And yes, indeed, sport can actually be a key tool for the prevention of youth radicalization and violent extremism in several different ways, and we will try to mention a few during this presentation. On the structure of this presentation, I would firstly start by trying to define and distinguish radicalization and violent radicalization, two different concepts, followed by referring to the process of radicalization and its enhancing factors. Afterwards, I will present some options of approach to the problem and contextualize it into the youth and sport sectors. And then I will finish my presentation with some prospects for the future, leaving you with some possible contributions for future discussions and development. And please rest assured that I will do my best to fulfill the 15 minutes that I have available for this presentation. So moving on, let's start by trying to set the grounds and define the concepts. Briefly, radicalization can be perceived as a process of adopting a system of, let's say, extremist values contrary to the current established order. And this happens usually with the purpose of changing this pre-established social order, substituting it for a different one. On the other side, violent radicalization involves violent behavior or its acceptance in order to impose a certain set of ideas, beliefs, and values. Whilst being radical about any given issue is quite a common behavior, especially during teenage years, the justification for the use of violence should not be acceptable in any circumstance. And then this radicalization process. This process usually includes four different phases. Cognitive openness, where the individuals or groups of individuals are prone to adhere to a new set of ideas, a new set of values and or beliefs, usually correlated with their social economic context, but not necessarily. The feeling of exclusion of these individuals leads them into a search for acceptance and therefore a search for religious, political, or social identity and its respective identity alignment with these radical ideas, movements, or groups. What is to say, when they finally find a context where they seem to fit in. And the last phase involves socialization with these radical groups within which they start to feel a sense of acceptance and belonging, and when action is triggered. And so, having said that, if radicalization can be perceived as a cognitive process, violent radicalization is its behavioral manifestation. Of course, this is a complex process that takes place in an evolutionary, dynamic, and interactive way. And we tried to show in the previous slide was a simplified theoretical approach to it. And please bear in mind that the fact that a young person comes out as a radical does not mean that he or she necessarily becomes a violent extremist. However, violence thrives on the fertile grounds of radicalization. And here we can see some of the major factors that can contribute to a higher propensity of young individuals to be radicalized. They can vary between individual factors, such as family structure or mental health profile, the use of drugs or the alcohol abuse, and so on, or between collective factors, such as the level of integration in society, the socioeconomic context, the access to social services, access to education, and so on. I have to underline here that there is no causal link between any of these factors and radicalization. It is not because an individual falls into any one or more of these categories that he or she will necessarily become an extremist. However, these factors are recognized as, let's say, potential warning signs. Bearing this in mind, how can we tackle this problem? What options of approach do we have? Firstly, we need to take into account that this phenomena of violent radicalization is divided into major components. An objective component, which is linked with its rational part, incorporated into the ruling elites, where the use of violence is instrumental and oriented towards the pursuit of previously established goals, and the character of the response to it is based mainly on the security dimension through the use of police or military or whatever. And a subjective component based on individual and collective perception, on the set of beliefs and interpretations of the reality, on the narrative grounds on which the intervention should be based, on the deconstruction of ideological matrices and their lines of argument, implying that the material conditions on which the arguments justifying violence are based must be addressed and ideally overcome. Due to the limitations of time, I shall not go into a deep analysis of these components. Here, the main message to retain is that our response to the phenomena should be both preventive, which is to say anticipating events, and reactive, responding to events, for both of these components. This should be our approach if we want to minimize the impacts of violent radicalization. Now, if we take a closer look at the youth and sports sectors, we can identify some risks associated in both areas. For youth, factors such as a greater online presence, the absence of a criminal record, and the favorable criminal framework for youngsters often facilitate easier distance recruitment, freedom of movement, and is less suspicious between the security forces. Therefore, if in one hand, youth is a period when individuals can be more prone to adhere to more radical ideologies, on the other hand, it is also one of the main recruiting targets of radical movements and groups. In terms of sport, we can also identify some sources of possible risks, such as the existence of organized informal groups such as hooligans or the so-called casuals and ultras, and the culture of violence they frequently perpetrate, the often excessive competitive emphasis on the dichotomy us versus them, the fact that more often than not, verbal or physical violence is not sanctioned, and the corruption in sport, sometimes connected with organized crime and hooliganism, creating almost a closed circuit ecosystem for violent behavior. And this brings me to the theme of this presentation: sport as a key tool for prevention of radicalization and violent extremism. Notwithstanding the above mentioned risks, the benefits of sport for the prevention of radicalization encompass its inherent social and educational dimension, as well as the underlying respect for human rights principles and its outreach capacity to the most vulnerable young people. Indeed, the values of sport, such as fair play, teamwork, respect, transparency and integrity, human rights, and so on, should be promoted either within individual or collective sports, but of course, bearing in mind the added value of the latter in fostering social inclusion and interpersonal relations, especially at the grassroots level. Furthermore, sport can reinforce young people's capacities, not only from a physical point of view, but from an interpersonal and psychosocial point of view, thus enhancing their soft skills and critical thinking capacities. Sport can also promote interreligious, intercultural, and intergenerational dialogue, bridging the gap that often leads to extremist positions and exclusion of the collective other by opposition to the collective us. I must underline that sport is an universal language capable of building bridges between cultures and its people. We have already seen concrete examples of this. Who doesn't, for example, remember the movie Invictus, on which rugby was portrayed as a factor of national cohesion? In more concrete terms, I would focus on the need and importance of develop cross-sectoral and multi-level approaches to young people, to young people's inclusion through sport. These should involve joint interventions involving the youth sector, sport clubs, social services, and when needed, also the security services, but also all other relevant stakeholders and partners at all levels. For this, a focus should be put on capacity building activities for all the actors involved, with a strong emphasis on coaches, facilitators, and athletes. They are the ones having more contact with young people, and young people observe their behavior and take cues as to behavioral norms, respect, and communication practices from our words and actions. Thus, coaches and athletes become important role models for youth in sport. Last but not least, we all recognize the challenges imposed by the current pandemic situation and its negative impacts, especially on young people. Issues like unemployment, mental health, mobility, and access to sport facilities and activities will deeply affect the younger generations in the coming times. For this, I would like to put forward the topic as sport innovation as a mean to advance with citizens' participation in sport and physical activity, enhance social economic development and inclusion through innovative ways of outreach to vulnerable groups and people with fewer opportunities. Sport innovation can also be linked with the concept of smart cities, for example, increasing the accessibility and proximity of our citizens to the cohesive and inclusive societies we aspire to. Thus, in this sense, sport innovation can address present and future challenges, making our societies more resilient to threats like radicalization and violent extremism. And this was it from my side for the moment. Thank you very much for your time. And of course, I am at the audience's full disposal for any question or any remark. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. For those of you who would like to follow up with questions, please write them in the chat, and we will have time for a Q&A session following our next speaker. I would now like to introduce Enzo D'Arcangelo. He's a former lecturer in statistics at the University of Rome La Sapienza and is currently a lecturer at the Advanced Interfaculty Training Course for Biomedical Practice. He is the author of numerous studies on the condition of young people in Italy, has served as a municipal councillor in Rome, and held the position of the president of Culture, Tourism, and Sport Commission. He actively collaborates with ISTAT, which is the Italian Statistical Institute, and is founder of Polisportiva. He's also the vice president of the Italian Volleyball Federation, head of the Statistical Observatory of the Italian Volleyball Federation, and author of several books on volleyball. So now we're going to hear about the impact of COVID-19 on the teenager sport practice in numbers. So we get to hear about stats or numbers and sports together. Enzo?
Allora, cercherò di essere breve per lasciare più spazio agli altri e quindi mi concentrerò soprattutto sulla parte quantitativa delle mie slides. Qui c'è un po' il simbolo della mia polisportiva, una frase di Pablo Neruda che ovviamente tutti quanti conoscete, che è giusto ricordare in questi momenti. Così le definizioni dello sport di De Coubertin, ma insomma adesso le lascio una lettura veloce, tanto saranno poi messe tutte quante in rete e le potete vedere con un po' di calma. E così le definizioni del Consiglio d'Europa, il famoso libro bianco del 2007, insomma, ci servono un po' per ricordare in varie situazioni da dove siamo partiti. Allora, brevemente le tappe della pandemia nel nostro paese. Dicembre 2019 sorge il problema in Cina e abbiamo i primi casi in Italia. Gennaio due persone vengono ricoverate a Roma, sono 2 turisti cinesi e inizia fondamentalmente tutto il percorso della pandemia nel nostro paese. Febbraio è molto importante perché succede lo sviluppo esponenziale della pandemia, ma soprattutto voglio ricordare un episodio su cui dovremo tornare poi in futuro. Il 19 febbraio si gioca a San Siro una partita della Coppa dei Campioni tra Atalanta e Valencia. Siccome non c'è l'impianto, viene giocato a San Siro a Milano e 50.000 tifosi di Bergamo assistono a questa partita che ormai viene definita la partita zero perché non c'è stato nessun tipo di prevenzione e probabilmente non c'era ancora la coscienza di quello che sarebbe successo nel mese successivo. Febbraio, dovremo tornare su febbraio, ma il governo per fortuna a marzo i dati sono drammatici e si comincia a intervenire già dal 7 di marzo sulla Lombardia che diventa zona rossa, ma lo stesso 8 marzo a Torino si gioca Juventus e Inter, importante perché è la partita un po' più famosa del calcio italiano, viene chiamata il Derby d'Italia e si gioca già a porte chiuse. Dopo pochi giorni inizia il lockdown e si chiudono le società sportive, ma si chiude soprattutto la scuola, il lockdown è totale e l'Italia è il primo paese ad adottare una misura così drastica e così dura fondamentalmente per tutti i cittadini. Sono 3 mesi molto difficili e finalmente a giugno sembra che la pandemia sia passata, si riapre l'attività e c'è una sottovalutazione invece della capacità di questo virus di ricrearsi. Si fanno ripartire le società sportive e vengono i primi aiuti da parte del governo, però gli aiuti del governo sullo sport sono concentrati soprattutto sugli operatori sportivi, che è una cosa importante perché moltissimi hanno preso un contributo non indifferente, poi ci si dimentica delle società sportive su cui torneremo perché in Italia il sistema sportivo italiano si basa fondamentalmente su questa realtà che sono le società sportive di base. Arriviamo ad ottobre dove si spera di ripartire fondamentalmente. Ci sono stati molti episodi, luglio, agosto, di poca attenzione, sono noti, ma ad ottobre c'è un ottimismo generale e si ripartono e lo sport italiano riparte con molta fiducia fondamentalmente, ma questa fiducia dura pochissimi giorni perché già alla fine di ottobre si è costretti a richiudere le attività e quindi rimangono aperte soltanto le attività all'aperto, su questo torneremo, e tutti gli sport di contatto, le palestre, ma soprattutto le piscine invece vengono chiuse e tuttora ad oggi sono ancora chiuse. Perché questo breve excursus sulla pandemia, perché oggi dobbiamo discutere degli effetti di questa pandemia sui giovani. Lascio a voi gli effetti più di carattere psicologico e sociologico. Io mi sono un po' concentrato come dirigente sportivo invece sugli aspetti quantitativi che già oggi possiamo cominciare a stimare. Le perdite sono state sugli effetti sono stati su 3 direzioni: le perdite economiche per lo sport professionistico, e quindi parliamo dei campionati di Serie A, di pallavolo, di pallacanestro, ma soprattutto ovviamente di calcio. Ma c'è stata una drastica riduzione anche del numero di praticanti, su cui non abbiamo ancora dei numeri sufficienti. Adesso vedremo quelli che ho raccolto io. E la terza invece, che è più cara per me, perché è tanti anni che mi batto affinché le società sportive vengano valorizzate per quello che fanno. Noi abbiamo 60.000 società sportive in Italia, ed è un patrimonio molto importante. E quindi vedremo che le perdite adesso sono su tutte e 3 queste direzioni. Sui praticanti io ho condotto una mia indagine, perché sono presidente di un coordinamento di società sportive di base che operano soprattutto nelle scuole e nei centri sportivi del comune e della provincia di Roma. Su una cinquantina di queste, oltre 50 di queste società, sono riuscito a ricostruire questi dati. La perdita minore è stata nella fascia di età 19-35 anni, perché lì ci sono molti atleti che sono rientrati nella categoria agonisti nazionali e per i quali è stato possibile continuare a fare attività. E quindi c'è stata una riduzione, ma non drammatica, un terzo dei praticanti. Molto più grave invece quello che è successo tra i bambini, perché nei bambini non c'è stata la definizione di attività giovanile di interesse nazionale, e quindi la riduzione, c'è stata, molte federazioni hanno cercato di valorizzare, tra cui anche la Federazione Pallavolo e la Federazione Calcio, di valorizzare l'attività giovanile come interesse nazionale, ma non tutte ci sono riuscite. E oggi possiamo dire che queste società che io ho intervistato con un piccolo questionario, la metà dei bambini, dei bambini e dei ragazzi sotto i 18 anni non ha fatto attività. Più grave è quello che è successo invece tra gli adulti, perché gli adulti pochissimi sono rientrati nella definizione ovviamente nazionale. In qualche caso ci si è riusciti con l'attività master che per esempio molte federazioni hanno, l'atletica leggera, ma anche il tennis tavolo, altre, e sono riusciti a proseguire. E la maggior parte invece abbiamo un 70% tra gli adulti, ma addirittura un 85% tra gli anziani, perché poi sugli anziani ovviamente l'attività di interesse nazionale quelli che sono riusciti a continuare a fare attività sono soprattutto laddove le società sportive hanno fatto attività all'aperto e non al chiuso. La cosa più importante è questa delle società sportive. Qui abbiamo alcuni dati, io ho raccolto personalmente quelli della Federazione Pallavolo, di cui curo l'osservatorio statistico, e da ottobre dell'anno passato, ottobre del 2019 a ottobre del 2020, la federazione ha perso 200 società, e questo è un dato molto preoccupante, perché certamente se questo è stato il 2020 sul 2019, il 2021 sarà ancora più grave. Le società sportive sono un patrimonio enorme, perché la Federazione Pallavolo ha 4.000 società sportive, quasi 4.800, e la seconda dopo il calcio, che ha 12.000 società sportive. In più sono società strutturate con molti praticanti. È ovvio che se una delle federazioni più importanti d'Italia ha questi dati, pensiamo a quelle invece meno strutturate e quelle più esposte al rischio di chiusura. La Federazione Pallavolo in questo periodo ha perso 60.000 tesserati, il 25%, uno su 23,7% per essere precisi. Ma purtroppo la maggioranza di questi sono giovani sotto i 14 anni. Praticamente dei 60.000, 45.000 sono ragazzi da 10, 11, 12, 13 anni, cioè un intero anno di reclutamento è saltato. Altro dato che ho raccolto, che è stata l'Associazione Italiana Circoli Sportivi, uno degli enti di promozione più attivi insieme al Centro Sportivo Italiano, all'UISP, insomma, di cui è riconosciuto il valore sociale e culturale, ha perso il 20% di società sportive e ha visto un calo anche loro di tesserati del 50% in questo periodo di pandemia. Veniamo al CSI, che insomma è l'ente a cui siamo qui, con cui stiamo lavorando in questo momento, e questi sono dati ufficiali, e vedete anche il CSI in un anno, dal 2020 al 2019 al 2020, ha perso 237.000 tesserati, cioè una cifra enorme, insomma, no? Il 17%. E quest'anno è stato ancora più forte, a tuttora abbiamo 655.000 tesserati in meno, insomma sono numeri preoccupanti che devono preoccupare sia il CONI, mi auguro, e soprattutto il governo. Ma vedete, anche le società ritorna a questo numero del 20% che già l'AIC, confermando quello che era successo già per l'AICS, insomma. E questo sono dati che ci devono far pensare, e soprattutto. Concludo con due riflessioni. Una sono i danni sociali, oltre a quelli quantitativi che abbiamo detto, insomma, e qui abbiamo un lavoro che ha fatto, e questa è la cosa forse più vicina un po' alle vostre tematiche, che sono importantissime. È ovvio che i danni dati dall'assenza del rapporto con la scuola, all'assenza del rapporto con la società sportiva nel territorio, con i propri amici, ha portato dei danni gravi anche dal punto di vista sociale. Uno è quella della solitudine, la mancanza di relazioni, la mancanza di rapporti. L'altro è che a lungo andare questa mancanza di relazioni sociali ha portato anche a episodi gravi di violenza che non vanno sottovalutati, insomma, non voglio neanche esaltarli, ma neanche sottovalutarli. Ecco, il Sole 24 Ore, questo è il dato che cercavo, ha fatto un'indagine su 1000 persone, anche questo è molto importante perché sono le prime indagini che vengono fatte, e vedete, ha messo in evidenza il problema della solitudine, che il 55% di persone è di grado in questo periodo di soffrire questo problema. E questo valore non è soltanto per gli anziani, per gli adulti, no? Che sono stati spesso chiusi dentro casa, ma soprattutto per i giovani, che è ovvio che vivono le relazioni in modo più fresco, più giovane, più allegro, più divertente. E la mancanza e il prolungarsi della pandemia ha portato dei danni molto, ma molto pesanti. Queste sono le prime indagini e chiaramente bisognerà tornare su questo con strumenti più precisi e soprattutto con indagini più valide dal punto di vista statistico. Chiudo dicendo che non voglio ecco, qui sono alcuni episodi, diciamo, no? Di violenza che ci sono stati in Italia, ma addirittura anche in tutta Europa, a Parigi, noto quello che è successo anche a Parigi, insomma. Su questo lascio a voi le riflessioni perché siete un po' più preparati su questi aspetti. È ovvio che non dobbiamo fare. Io voglio chiudere con due riflessioni fondamentalmente. Una, proprio dal punto di vista concettuale, non possiamo pensare che a settembre, no, o ottobre, quando sarà finito questo tipo di pandemia, lo sport italiano, lo sport europeo possa riprendere come se niente fosse successo. Da molte parti si sente dire no, adesso c'è la ripresa, ma quello che è successo è talmente profondo nella modifica dei rapporti proprio tra i giovani, tra le società sportive, nelle discipline, che avremo difficoltà anche una volta che siamo usciti dalla pandemia. E su questo dovremo fare un grosso sforzo unitario per capire tra società sportive, le federazioni, gli enti di promozione, il CONI, il governo e l'Europa, come si possa ridare allo sport le sue sicurezze, perché in questo momento le ha perdute. La seconda riflessione, che abbiamo visto alcune piccole indagini, piccoli numeri, sono ancora numeri poco significativi da un punto di vista, diciamo così, della validità statistica, ma interessanti perché sono numeri veri, no? Di ciò che sta succedendo. Allora, su questo dobbiamo fare un grosso sacrificio, mettere in campo subito delle ricerche su quello che è successo, che sta succedendo sui giovani, sugli adulti, sugli anziani, i prezzi che hanno pagato. Perché c'è bisogno di fare queste ricerche, c'è bisogno di andare a fondo, non di rimanere sulla superficie, perché è mia condizione, è una mia ipotesi, che i danni sono molto più gravi di quelli che adesso noi stessi, che siamo più attenti, stiamo dimostrando, insomma. E quindi questo è quanto. Grazie a tutti quanti.
Grazie.
Per non essere stato troppo lungo, scusatemi per l'italiano, però insomma, visto che siete organizzati con la traduzione.
Oh. All right, now my computer has now lost the Zoom. Where is it? There. Okay, we now have thank you very much for that. We now have a little bit of time for questions. And I see that there is one question in the chat already. If you have any other questions now for either Pedro or Enzo, please feel free to write them in the chat. And I would just like to say that there was mention about the need for research and understanding the long-term impact of this on youth. And I have to say that I think that one of the things that we would be worth focusing on that was just mentioned was the impact of the isolation, mental health issues, potential rage, and also increased use of computer time and how that can potentially impact the radicalization of youth who are now disconnected from their regular social lives and athletic lives. I would now like to pass to a question. We have a question from Alcidio Jesus, and this is for Pedro. So regarding the themes that we are addressing here today, namely related with youth and sport actors, can you tell us what type of financing programs are being prepared or are already on the move so that entities working in these areas can apply for continuing their work within the community and all sport and youth sectors?
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting question, and very interesting indeed, because and timely put, because actually one of the main financial instruments available both for the youth and the sports sector in these topics, but also in other topics, is the Erasmus Plus, as you know. And actually we are now finalizing the process of adoption of the regulation for this new phase of the program. You might know, you might seen in the news that actually the annual program for the Erasmus Plus has already been adopted, and so this would be one of the major examples of available funding programs for these issues. But let me stress another important point on this. I think that all of the entities and organizations dealing with these topics could benefit if we somehow strengthen the relation between the youth and the sports sectors in the topic of prevention of violent radicalization and in the scope of social inclusion, because this kind of broader approach opens more opportunities of funding and allows for more broader and efficient projects. For example, in this type of broader approaches, we could, for instance, think on the European Solidarity Course program, which is also, like the Erasmus Plus, being finalized the adoption process of the new regulation. Also, of course, like this, the case of this project, the Internal Security Fund, of course, but also the Asylum and Migration Fund, dealing with the integration of, for example, young people with migrant background through sport, which could function as a very important tool for integration, but also other funding opportunities on the scope of the European Social Fund, for example. But and we heard a few minutes ago the question of research in this topic. Let me underline the existence of European funding programs specifically dedicated to research, like the Horizon Europe, for example, which can also be a good funding opportunity. The key issue that I would underline would be to try to develop more broad approaches to this, involving different sectors. And this project is actually, the Safe Zone is a very good example of this, how you can bring together two sectors, youth and sports, in order to address, to respond to a social challenge. And this opens more doors for funding than just focusing in one specific dimension of the problem. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, to our second half of the seminar. And we're going to start off with our first roundtable, which is on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on teenager sport practice. And this will be moderated by our partner in Portugal, Mariana Barbosa at the Catholic University of Porto. Mariana.
Okay, thank you, Vanja, and welcome, good morning, and welcome to the first roundtable of this webinar. As Vanja already told you, my name is Mariana Barbosa. I work in the Catholic University of Portugal, that is one of the Portuguese partners of Safe Zone project, along with the Portuguese Sports and Youth Institute. In this roundtable, we'll discuss, as Vanja also told, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the teenager sports practice. We will have interventions from 3 speakers, and in the end, I hope we have some time for questions and give the floor to you all. Let's see. But before presenting the first speaker, I would like to address that one of our Portuguese partners, Raquel Lira, is her birthday today, and so I would like to notice that and say and give a happy birthday to Raquel. Happy birthday, Raquel.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for doing this, but I think Raquel is working a lot for this project. She's being very important for all of us, and so it's her birthday during the seminar, so I'd like to give her congrats for that. So moving on to our roundtable. Our first speaker is from my country, Portugal, Paulo Rocha. Paulo Rocha is the head of Sports for All Division, a sport department of the Portuguese Sports and Youth Justice. He's an expert in the Portuguese Mission Sports Working Group under the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union, project coordinator in the European Union Physical Activity and Sports Monitoring System, and he is also invited professor at the Faculty of Human Motricity in Lisbon. So, Paulo, I will give you the floor, and thank you so much for being here.
So, first of all, thank you, Mariana, for your kind words. Just taking opportunity also to send some congrats to Raquel. Unfortunately, we don't have opportunity to meet in person and to have a glass of wine or water or juice.
Port wine.
Or whatever. But I extend in your name, Mariana and Vanya, the congratulations for this seminar and the opportunity to organize this kind of discussions within the hurricane that we are at the moment. So just taking and recalling you, I think that I don't need to, but we are still in several countries under the emergency state. So the problem is still here. It's not did not go away yet. Several countries, as you know, have huge measures in place that are still limiting the physical activity and sport among the different segments of the population. The situation is completely different in some of the countries. The measures are more or less the same when we are looking on the different levels of severity of the pandemic situation. So this term and this theme is in fact, or this issue is in fact a very relevant one, because in fact we are still suffering from this situation at the moment. I will present you very briefly some data that we collected under a multi-center study including also, curiously, including also Italy. So from colleague Viviana Zito from the South. She also has worked a lot on this project, and we gather a group of different countries that made a specific intervention, started last year in April, March 2020, and we repeat it again. So we finished 2 weeks ago this regard, and I will try to present some of the preliminary data that we already take a look in order for you to understand what is the real impact on data, fresh data, on these segments of the population. However, and before start, I would like also to address two issues that are coming directly to the previous interventions and with this new intervention, is that the fact that a small group of the population, teenagers, children, and youngsters are involved in this kind of intervention programs. Unfortunately, what we have assisted is that in the different countries, the majority of the kids are not included on a formal basis sports systems. So the first problem that we are having is the problem of adherence to the sports sector. And then we are having another second issue, which is even more relevant, is how to maintain the youngsters and children included on the sport. So this is raising another type of questions about the sport dropout, and we have been developing with some international partners also some programs related with the sport dropout. But to finalize this first introduction and then move on to some of the data, I also would like to acknowledge to you that in fact at the moment the challenge is not already working only on physical activity on sport participation. It's much more beyond that, because we are talking about in joining on the same type of interventions, not only the question about radicalization, extremism in sport, but the problem about inclusion, the problem about the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda included on this process, the question about sustainability, which is for this transitional moment is also relevant, the problem about green sports, and the problem about the new ways of participating in sport from this young generation. They are running away from the traditional sport type interventions, and they are looking for different opportunities, different ways of expressing themselves, expressing their behaviors, and we need to adjust our specific interventions in order to get to their points, to get where they are, to get to their settings, and to get the message according to their willingness. So I think that there is a long way still to do in this regard. So not taking much more time, I will share it with you, some of the data. I will not share it everything because it's a little bit exhaustive, but I will share some of the data. So let me do it here. I think that at the moment you can already see the slides, and just to remind you that we come at this moment with the final data that we have published in the adult sector based on the Eurobarometers. You all know that the numbers are not quite good in terms of physical activity and sport prevalence among Europe. There are, of course, some countries that are better than others, but when we take a look on the data that we have available regarding physical activity and sport participation among children, girls, and boys, it's more or less easy to identify that most of them do not comply with the recommendations from WHO regarding the 60 minutes of physical activity per day. So as you can see, only 23% of the boys and 40% of the girls are in fact coping with this kind of objective. So with the starting point before the pandemic is very, very low. So you can imagine how the pandemic increased this situation. So I would like to also to remind you that this is at the moment for societies, this is not only a problem about participation, it's also about social and economical development of the different segments of the population. I just remind you, for example, when some people talk about, for example, a simple idea, which is mortality, at the moment is very relevant. We can see that the time passed in sedentary behavior is directly linked with mortality for all causes, not only in the different segments of population, but also in youngsters and children and youngsters. But how much does this cost in Europe? As you can imagine, we are talking about, and this is some data that we collected objectively in the 2012, we are talking about per year something about 80 billion euros, 80 billion euros in expenses because people don't eat well and don't make physical activity. So this is a huge amount of costs coming directly from health and other social costs because people don't do enough physical activity. On the contrary, we know already, I'm sorry for this busy slide, I'm coming from the physiology world, so for you it's completely Chinese what is going on here, but it's only to show you that physiologically, we know already from the evidence that the body, the muscles working, have capacity to produce themselves a group of molecules, a group of substances that influence and alter and modify the organic metabolism. I only make, for example, highlight for this BDNF, this green one, that is associated with recovery and health of the neurological system. So that's why we understand now that youngsters that make more sport are not only well in terms of well-being and body composition and cardiorespiratory fitness, but they have additional capacity to learn better and to get better results from cognitive performance at school. So I will show you briefly the data that we collected under this group of countries, and I will show you the main results from this work that is already published. Was published 3 or 4 weeks ago, so it's available for you to take a look on the data. And I want to show you that in Europe, in 10 countries of Europe, including also in addition Russia, that was involved also, 19%, only 1/5 of the children are meeting the WHO physical activity guidelines, which is 60 minutes per day of physical activity. However, when we take a look on the sedentary behavior, and the sedentary behavior looked upon the screen time, so the time that people pass in phone, iPads, computer, and so on for school purposes or for recreational purposes, we are talking about that most of them are much more than the 2 hours per day that are recommended. And this increased, and this is the data that we saw already from the last 2 weeks, this increased from averages of 2-3 hours per day to in the last weeks of data collection, we are talking about more than 6 hours per day of average. So we are talking here a huge and dramatic alteration of the habits, which we are going to pay in the near future. We are already paying, and we are going to pay in the near future. I will not bother you too much with the data, but I would like to show you, for example, when the Portugal data, which is pretty much similar to those countries like Italy or Hungary or Spain that also collect data. When you take a look, for example, the number of days that youngsters made at least 60 minutes per day of moderate physical activity, if you are looking about the percentage of the days of 5 days per week, so 60 minutes per day, only if you see only 25% are achieving this. The rest are not achieving this amount of physical activity. And when you take a look on the days, for example, regarding prevalence of sedentary behavior, so the time that they spent on PC, TV, for social media and playing games, so recreational time, look the data that are the prevalences associated with more than 2 days, which is the recommendation of the international organizations. So there was a completely shift on the behavior pattern of these youngsters population. And if you want to go a little bit further on the data results and to close my intervention, when you go to the formal federation system, this is not only a problem from Portugal, this is also a problem that is identified all over Europe in the traditional federation systems, sports systems. When you take a look on the dropout because of the pandemic situation, here you have the data for 5 major federations in Portugal: handball, volleyball, basketball, football, and hockey. So when you take a look on this data, you see that the rates of dropout are among 60 or more than 50%. So more than half of the kids and the persons that are included inside of the system are dropping out from the system. So you can imagine what will be the effort when you are talking about, youngsters, 5 federations. You can imagine the effort that is going to be made in order to get back those that drop out and get additional ones that still are not looking for the system. So I think that regarding the federation system and regarding the local social sport system, I'm talking about local clubs, local organizations where these kind of projects can be spin-off, like your project can be spin-off specifically. There is a huge challenge in the upcoming, let's say, 5 years. It's combining the possibility of, for the youngsters, seeing some interest in participating in this kind of structured formats first, and then how and what to give him in order to combine a product that is based on sport, but including the sustainability, the inclusion, the anti-radicalization, the question about the Green Deal, the question about internationality, and so on and so on. So I'm going to finish my intervention just to show you that these have, and this is data very recently, these are having a huge impact on health, mental health from these segments of the population. We are talking about depression and anxiety, at least. So there are ways that countries need to tackle these. And all over Europe, probably most of you know the Be Active campaign. This is one of the ways that Europe is, in a coordinated way, trying to address the situation. So I leave you here something that all countries, in case it's Portugal, are trying to address and take a moment with another way of communicating, using digital platforms, using other channels where the youngsters are, in order to arrive them and to give them some messages and some recommendations, how to keep active, how to move on, and how to take advantage of at least the possibilities that life can bring through and with physical activity in sport. So this is my main regards at the moment, and I will be available to whatever question that you might have under this data, under this issue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Paulo, for this amazing presentation and for sharing with us all this important data. I think it shows us how serious this problem really is. But we hope to contribute with this, with our project and with more efforts to counteract this issue. you can count with us, on us for that also.
We will need your support in that effort, of course.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will leave the questions for the end, okay? Hoping that we have time for that. And now I will move to the presenting our second speaker that is already here. So I hope to say the name correctly. I will give the floor to Matej Lunešnik. Is it a good pronunciation?
Bravo. Bravo. I will invite you to my birthday party. So nice. You said so nice my name. Bravo.
But is your birthday also today? Or I didn't understand.
Sometimes you have a lot of birthdays, but unfortunately today is not my birthday,
Okay,
so we cannot celebrate. It's coming in autumn.
Okay, Matej Lunešnik. So he's a sports psychologist and mental trainer, works with individual sportsmen as well as teams. At the moment, he works with one of the strongest football teams in Slovenia, best tennis players and some of best alpine ski racers. He also runs the workshops for business companies on leadership and interpersonal communication among employees. So, Matej, I will give you the floor, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mariana Barbosa. Barbosa Italiana?
Portuguese.
Portuguese, okay. How do you then pronounce your name, Barbosa or Barbosa?
Barbosa. Like if it was a Z.
Italians do, yeah, okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, very nice to meet you. Hello to everybody. I'm very honored to be with you, to speak in front of you. And thanks to my very big friend, Goran Gumze, to invite me here. I will say like this, today we are talking about a topic that is very clear. And what happens to athletes during this impact of COVID-19 pandemic, I would like to say it's a very big disaster. I don't need to be a very big expert in this field to say that this is a tragedy for sport that will resonate for a long time to come. And above all, it touched young people, teenagers, and especially those who are not in sport just because of the medals, winning, or the pressure of parents, but more because of themselves or their progress they made in sport, which should be also the main reason in sport at all. And sport is above all, I like to say this very often, that criterion, if not the only one in our lives, which really most objectively sets the criteria for the functioning of each individual. The result is a measure. The result is all your work, talent, ability, effort. And that's the current and the cruelty or purity of the sport, if you will. And in this COVID situation, however, sport, due to its political minor role in society, again, immediately landed behind closed doors. Also, playing sports strengthens the immune system, which is the strongest soldier in the fight against the virus. I think this is a big paradox. And sport has lost this objectivity, as there are large differences in possibilities of training and implementation of the training process, depending on the epidemiological situation of individual areas. So it is no longer just your effort, skills, and enthusiasm that matters, but the result also depends on whether your teammate sticks to measures and takes care of his health, what policy the government pursues towards sport, and in the end, also whether a foolish jerk will come pass by and cough into you, if you know what I mean. I saw a lot of these things when I'm now working with teams and sportists. They just sometimes are not so lucky, we can say, and they catch somehow this virus, and then the results and their process of training is ruined. I work a lot with those athletes, especially with top athletes from various sports. I observed through the year that top athletes with the COVID situation have not been as affected as those who are not top notch. Especially younger athletes experienced the greatest lack in the training process and in the social field. I have also experienced a lot of anxiety and depression in those who have not been able to train as much as they would like to. The restriction of sport participation may therefore have a detrimental impact to young people, mental health, and well-being, with periods of inactivity, isolation from athletic teams, distance from the athletic community, less qualified interactions with athletic coaches, and lack of social support having been shown to cause emotional distress and psychological disorders in athletes. The disruption in both personal and competition schedules may also lead to athletes struggling to maintain motivation. A lot of children just quit doing their sport. It is important to ensure that children and young athletes can access guidance and information to assist them in building on or developing healthy coping strategies. This includes developing a daily schedule focused on nutrition, fitness, flexibility, learning, and social connections. They further recommended that young athletes be encouraged to share this schedule with friends and coaches to increase accountability and motivation. When considering the impact of isolation, feelings experienced by children when their sport activities have been cancelled may also include disappointment, missing their teammates, and worry that they will get behind, lose skills without practice. Indeed, with the interruption in learning, the inability to go to school and the cancellation of sport, the pandemic may have created a sense of isolation that can spread more widely than the pandemic itself among millions of children. The impacts may be magnified among elite young athletes. For these vulnerable children who are fortunate to be active in sport, sport is often their lifeline, and COVID-19 has taken away the safe space and social emotional outlet that their participation in sport may have provided. So it varies considerably. Some young elite athletes receive payment for their sporting activities through labor contracts, commercial endorsements, monthly wages, compensation agreements, scholarship, etc. And for some young athletes, this money may be very important to their livelihood and for their families. Such financial arrangement may be threatened during during this pandemic. This may make young athletes more vulnerable to exploitation and lead to greater pressure to take risks, including, for example, willingness to use banned substances. Additionally, it is important to consider that most young athletes are also students. Disruption in education and schooling, including the postponement of exams, may lead to pressure for elite young athletes to focus on school and education at the expense of sport participation and training. So as I said, I think we shouldn't have this theme today. I think this is a big disaster for young athletes, especially teenagers that we're talking about, and that sport is something that can be very positive in a battle with this virus, because you have always two poles. You can attack or you can hide or playing defense. It's also in sport like this. And what we are doing now, we are like almost playing this defense, like taking care of measures, hiding somewhere. No, we don't attack. We can attack this virus. We can be stronger. Our immune systems can be stronger also through providing sport. And this is also important message to young sportists and teenagers, to provide sport, to be healthier, to be stronger in any battle with anything, not just viruses. So this is my part now, and I would like to introduce you to psychologist Nicole Orber. She helps me a lot. She's a very good psychologist. She's also a sportist, and she's specialized in sport of cheerleading. And this is exactly the kind of sport that is somehow on the edge of the matrix of top sports, if you know what I mean. And Nika will tell you from first hand how she experienced the measures and the situation as a coach and as an athlete. So Nika, please join us and tell us a little bit about your experience experiencing this COVID situation as a coach, and also how your teenagers who you're working with, how they felt in this situation. Please, Nika.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would just like to explain to those who don't know what cheerleading actually is. It's a sport that consists of stunts, tosses, human pyramids, and tumbling. So we're basically throwing people around. And we have to work together to actually practice this sport. So it's very hard for us to do this online. But we did it anyways. So we moved our practice to Zoom, and we faced some difficulties, of course, like everyone, I suppose. First of one of the difficulties is the equipment. So the computers, internet connection, and so on. So it's really hard when the coaches don't have the right equipment or good enough equipment. So it's really frustrating for the athletes then to understand or see when the internet connection is unstable and they can hear. Then the athletes also sometimes don't have the right conditions to exercise at home. Like they don't have enough space, or they can't arrange their computer in a way that the coach can actually see what they're doing, and they can't really give feedback that they needed to improve. And the coaches also have to be very creative sometimes to keep the practices interesting for the athletes. For example, with the peewees, so the children, it's hard sometimes because in the gym we used to play games to warm up, and with Zoom it's difficult because they can't catch or run around, so it's a little bit more boring for them. And it's also, you also have to be creative to make exercises work in a home setting. And the last difficulty that we face is the dropout rate. We actually are lucky that in the junior and senior division, we didn't really face any, but it was really visible with the peewees. So yeah, it's sad and, like you already said, unfortunate. But I also tried to look at the Zoom practices from a positive angle. And the advantages of online practices are, for example, lower cost.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Nika. I have to interrupt for a moment. We're running behind schedule, and I'm afraid, unfortunately, the speaker who is scheduled for 12:45 can only be with us for that short time period. So if you can just say a final concluding remark, And then we need to switch to our second roundtable's first speaker, who will speak, and then we'll come back to finish the first roundtable. So sorry about the schedule change, but we're a bit behind schedule, and I'm afraid that he cannot stay with us for long.
Okay, then I will just move on to the next topic, which I wanted to talk about, and that's how the teenagers, our teenagers, are getting those, what they are feeling now during the COVID pandemic. So because of the safety measures, they say they feel tired, less energized, their mental health is declining, and they don't really have a will to do anything. They also notice that their physical abilities are worse than they were before.
I'm sorry, Nika, but he has to speak. I'm afraid that he really has to leave. So
Okay.
I'm really sorry, but he was scheduled to speak at 12:45, and apparently he cannot stay longer than the scheduled time.
Okay, then.
Okay, I'm very sorry. We have to adjust to this change.
Okay,
And then
I
we will
think
come
we all
back to
understood,
that. So
Nika.
please
Nika,
keep
thank you
your
very
thoughts.
much. Thank you for everybody. Sorry for this delay a little bit.
Okay, my apologies, but we need to.
Sorry, Vanja, I will come back to both of you.
Yeah.
When we come again to our roundtable, I will come back. And thank you so much also for your presentation, Nika, and we will come back to you.
Yeah, we will come back to finish the second roundtable, but due to scheduling difficulties, we need to give the floor now to this first speaker from the second roundtable. Goran, can you please do the introductions as this is your roundtable? Where are you?
I'm here. Hello.
Okay. All right. You want to, I understand Zlatan Desmond really only has these few minutes to be with us. So if we can give the floor to him now, and then we'll go back to our second roundtable.
Hello, everyone. Yes, just as I understood correctly, Dr. Zlatan Dežman has to be with us straight away. And the second roundtable will miss one speaker. Dennis Dietrich has excused himself. So I will give the word to Dr. Dežman, senior judge at the Court of Maribor in Slovenia and associate professor of criminal law at the Faculty of Law in Maribor. He is over 50 years he works in the area and has a lot of experience that he will actually somehow share with us. Please, Dr. Dežman.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. Let me have a few thoughts over 50 years of practice martial arts experience and their contribution to culture of non-violence and preventing the political radicalization of young people in particular. All martial arts have in common that they are self-defense. This characteristic of their already exclude aggression in this respect, but on the other hand, it directly releases aggression in playful, imitated, benign, positive, or constructive aggression. Martial arts often give the impression that the essence of training is only speed, strength, skill, and knowledge of various techniques, while ignoring the inner, subjective, and psychical side, which through their training leads to personal transforming in accordance with their ethical principles, and this deeper insight, which are a condition of coexistence with their social and natural environment. Therefore, it may seem downright paradoxical that the martial arts, the ones that contribute to the prevention of violence, the purpose of regular training is primarily to achieve a relaxation of body and mind. Only inner peace allows sobriety and spontaneous non-violence reaction at the critical moment, which strengthens self-confidence. The practice of martial arts, together with their ideology and philosophical views, on man and society is one of the most diverse mental techniques for reforming personal identity. Therefore, they are among the ideal psychological preparation for overcoming various ideological views on man and society is one of the most diverse mental techniques for forming a personal identity. Therefore, they are among the ideal psychological preparation for overcoming various stressful situations both in the business world and in everyday life. Namely, martial arts masters are accompanied by the awareness that they have a limit their power over when they themselves are exposed to an attack that may serve them even after life. That is, in a situation where the self-preservation instinct being to prevail. Such awareness, however, requires self-confidence, which is the consciousness that depending on the abilities and skills he will be able to achieve a way out of the conflict situation in a social acceptable way. Precisely because of such physical properties, they are especially expected. They have a great ability to control their own state, which stems from training martial arts and curbing their own impulsive. Therefore, they are expected to be accompanied by a greater sense of security from a possible attack that is filled with the awareness that they know the secrets of effective self-defense rather than an attack or violence that only leads to escalating violence. Such an expectation justifies the ability to manage conflict situation in peaceful way, or at least with the greatest possible leniency towards the aggression or attacker. Despite such a mission, martial arts also face to question of where the boundaries begin, from which their use can become excessive and therefore abuse, which has not only negative moral and ethical consequences, but also is liability for damage and the criminal liability. Martial arts, however, are difficult to abuse because their practical application requires a lot of practice and strong will. Such kind of will, a bully whose sole purpose is to abuse martial arts to experience violence simply cannot do when he realized how long it takes to get to know them. This dilemma is most often related to the question of when and under what condition the criminal law allows self-defense, to which everyone has the right as his constitutional right to the inviolability of life and the preservation of his own dignity. We must be aware that the deterrence of the violence provokes not only a demand for a quick defensive reaction, but the experience of being threatened by violence is associated with an intense emotional experience in which our consciousness narrow to what cause effect, that is irritability and fear. In such an emotional state, However, one of his defensive reactions most fears and little or almost nothing things. I don't think when I say in guarantee that I say that martial arts are really abused and their training is on the with the last psychical injuries among sports, especially considering how massively they are cultivated all over the world. This is because our techniques are recalculated, direct until the injury occurs, but does not happen because the exercise itself requires that the most careful attitudes towards the partner as that he is not injured. As a judge, I can also ensure I have very rarely met anyone who would commit a violent crime and be a martial arts master at the same time, or the holder of any lower belt and abuse such a skill of his. And at the last, what is the most important, by practicing martial arts, therefore, the weaker become stronger, and the stronger become nobler, more tolerant, and therefore more forgiving. The realization, however, is one of the can make an important contribution to culture of non-violence and at the same time prevent political radicalization. So thank you.
Thank you very
Dr.
much.
Zlatan Dežman. Vanya, what do you suggest? Shall we return to the first roundtable or finish the second? I think we should conclude the first one and then maybe.
Yes, that was the thought, to finish up the first one. And the only thing is now, if there are any questions for our last speaker, as I understand he needs to leave, then please write them in the chat now. And I will give the floor back to Mariana. Mariana, if you see any questions in the chat, then please take a look, okay?
For now, we don't have the questions, but anyway, if they will appear, I will.
Yes, okay. And the questions that are there, we'll take at the end. Okay, Mariana, you want to finish your roundtable? Sorry about all this turned around schedule. So.
Thank you, Vanja, and very sorry to the speakers of our roundtable, and let's continue to our roundtable. But first, before introducing the third speaker, I would like to give the opportunity to Nika to finish what she was saying, and also then if you want to write your questions, because now in the chat it's becoming very messy, so if you have questions to Paulo or to Matei, please write it in the chat so that we can answer and do the discussion of their presentations before moving to the third speaker. So I will give you the floor, Nika, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I will try to be really quick. I just wanted to say that the teenagers also noticed the difference in their endurance. It was worse as it was before. The technical skills were also worse, and the strength was about the same because we did a lot of strength training in Zoom, and their motivation was peaked now when we were able to train for a month in our gyms, but has also decreased now because we are facing the second lockdown, and is also lower than it was in the first lockdown. Yeah, that's all for what I prepared, but I also saw a question in the chat for me, and I would say the most important thing to do is just to be there for them, to keep practicing even if it has to be online, because it's still a schedule for them, something they have to do, and maybe talk how they feel. Yeah, that's the one thing I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nika. I don't know if anyone has questions, or maybe, I don't know, Vanja, is it possible that the person will address the question, not only in the chat? I don't know. Or
I'm sorry. Yeah, please, the question should be written in the chat so that.
Okay, maybe some, okay, I think there is one question here.
But you have one more speaker as well.
I know, but
Okay. Yeah,
there are some questions. So Hugo is asking, I think the data presented clearly shows that youngsters lost interest in federation sport. So let me see. I don't know, Paulo, if you can see this question from Hugo.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for these two questions. Both Pedro and Hugo raise here some questions about how to measure participation of youngsters in these different type of activities, because in fact we are noticing that if all children are included in school, it's not the fact that all children are included on the sport federated system and on local organizations system for both youth and sports sector, or together. So I think this is one of the biggest issue at the moment in this level. And in Portugal, we are coordinating along with the different countries at European level, one big initiative, which is called EUPASMOS, the European Union Sport, Physical Activity and Sport Monitoring System, which, by the way, finishes today the official date of the project. We have included 18 countries, so the majority of the countries of the European Union are involved, and we are trying to develop, let's say, an harmonized, reliable, comparable monitoring system in order to get data from physical activity and sport participation in terms of prevalence, but also in addition to understand how it's going on with the questions about the sedentary behavior and what are the determinants, which means the causes associated behind the fact that people do or don't do, and if they do, why they do it, and if they don't do, why they don't do it. This is particularly relevant, not only in adults and seniors, because some part of these questions about participation are also being raised in other sectors of the population, as you can imagine. For example, I will not take too much time, but for example, the question about the seniors all over Europe, we have in society a problem that we need to address, of course, and the pandemic situation show it that there is a dramatic problem with this sector of segment of the population, need to address it. But of course, regarding this, we have an additional project which is led by a colleague from Mattia. I don't know if it was, probably I will not say so good like Mariana, but a colleague from Slovenia is Gregor Jurak from University of Ljubljana that is running this feedback project where we are trying to measure physical activity in a similar way, in a comparable way among Europe. So in the upcoming 1-2 years, probably, we will have at European level set 2 monitoring systems for getting data from these young populations and then from the adults and seniors. Hopefully, and for the purpose of and to close these questions, to get you enough data and quality of data for you to organize your interventions and to understand how to deal with the different type of youngsters, boys and girls, different ages, pre-pubertal, after puberty youngsters, which has different determinants for dropping out, for example, and to adhere to sport, we need to, in fact, collect comparable data. At this moment, I can tell you that in Europe, it's a mixed salad. So some countries have systems, other countries don't collect data, and the different systems to collect data does not made available a possibility of compare data. So we are a little bit blind at the moment, but we are improving, and I hope that in the upcoming 1-2 years, we will have something reliable, endorsed by the European Commission, endorsed by member states, and then in a top-down perspective, associations can rely on that data in order to develop specific interventions targeted for specific groups in order to address different people. Girls that are making swimming, that are doing swimming in a club, are completely different than girls that are organizing themselves to make some hip-hop or to make some urban sports, which the setting and the idea of approaching to the sport is completely different. And now we are talking to everybody, and with the message to everybody, we do not reach anyone. We will keep talking and talking and talking, and nobody listens. So if we don't go for specific and tailored and clinical message, we don't achieve to the point. But we don't have data now. So we need to gather the data, and then for sure your work will be much more tailored in order to go directly to the street points. That's my main concern, but hopefully we are doing it, and in the upcoming months or 1 or 2 years, we will be available to deliver the data at the European level, and for sure we will improve a lot from this.
Thank you, Paulo. This is indeed really important. Well, I'm suspicious because I work in university, so we are always concerned with data. But yes, that is very important. And once again, I think we hope.
Mariana, there is a huge challenge, just 30 seconds, a huge challenge at the European level at the moment. And I think everybody already understood this is more broad. You know the question about 5G, you know the question about data, about big data analysis. This is something that Europe now is starting to take a look. And of course, we need to take a look, because to gather this kind of data, we need support from another level of technology, mapping and organizing us to deal with the big data analysis. And we are lacking on this big data analysis, and some other areas of the world have already give long steps in terms of big data analysis, and some of those steps are a little bit suspicious, let's say, more data and more analysis that they should, but we need this challenge to overcome this situation and to adjust better policies and better interventions for sure.
Thank you so much. No, thank you so much. I will now and hope that then we can then have time for discussion again with our speakers. So please continue to put your questions in the chat. And now I will give the floor to, and let's see how is my pronunciation in German. Oh, sorry, it's here. So Dr. Matthias Markhoff from the University Hospital in Münster. I hope I did it pronounce it well. Sex and Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and is addressing the results of an online survey amongst 1,038 pupils in the age groups of between 11 and 17 years old. And this survey was compiled during the first lockdown due to the corona pandemic from March to April 2020 in Germany. The pupils were asked about the physical activities, their media usage, and their emotional well-being during the first lockdown. Dr. Matthias, I will give you the floor, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Yes, thank you very much. And well, Eckhart, who invited me to today, asked me in advance to be brief and concise, and yeah, I will try to stick to that, because and I can easily do that, because mostly our results are in line with what Paulo said before. So we have well, a dramatic slump in physical activity in general, observed in this group. This refers to physical activity and also physical exercise. In both fields we have well, a strong decrease. On the other hand, we have a similarly strong increase in screen time, and in particular there is a group of 45%, so almost half the adolescents who spend more than 8 hours per day in front of a screen. So this is quite an impressive number. And the third point I would like to make is that, well, regression analysis revealed in our data that there is a close association between physical activity and mental well-being. So we observed deteriorations in mental well-being, particularly when it comes to general worrying, everyday worrying, and life satisfaction, and both variables are highly significantly associated with physical activity. And what I would like to add, because this is a certain twist maybe in the data, what we found that, and what was astonishing, we didn't expect that the female participants seem to cope far better than the male participants did. So and we guess, and unfortunately it's not more than guessing, that that they compensate for losses in everyday physical activity by using online platforms, exercise platforms. They use them twice as much as boys do in our cohort. And this is one aspect, and the second aspect is actually walking. So we found an increase in time spent walking in the female participants. So this seems to be a coping strategy they employ. So in our groups of adolescents, the females cope better than the boys do. And one last thing, there is one group, and this is about 25% of the students we investigated, and they actually have stopped being active completely. So, and this is quite a huge number, and this increased, it's a five-fold now. So we have 5% before the pandemic and 25% during the pandemic. And as we all know, such a complete lack of physical activity has all those negative consequences for somatic health, but also for mental health. And maybe I can leave it like that, because that's only adding points that we've already made before. So I'm open to questions as well now, of course.
Thank you so much, Matthias. So I will try to look up for the questions that we have here. I will maybe ask that who put some questions in the chat, if they can put them again or copy paste, so that I can see them, because then some people are speaking with me and I cannot see the questions. I'm very sorry for being this awful moderator, but I cannot see the questions right now in my chat. So I think there was some question from Pedro, for example, and I don't know if there is any questions for Matthias. I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I think it's important to address or to give the speakers opportunity to reply to some questions. Okay. So there is this question to Paulo. Question: if the school sports program could be adapted and expanded in order to, I'm sorry, I'm having here some problems. In order
Mariana,
to,
this is
you can
mainly a
read it?
question.
I'm sorry.
Yes, this is mainly a question related with our national system, which is more or less quite similar to, for example, those that are in place in some countries about the availability of sport inside of school. So the idea is very simple. Since and Matthias just bring this up again with the data from Germany, which in fact is the question is, we don't have too much people from these segments of the population being involved outside school in the sport setting, in a sport structure. And when we have it, we understand that they are dropping out, or the pandemic situation as here, a huge situation on both on the structural practice point of view, and in addition on recreational physical activity of daily life. And in different cohorts, girls and boys from different ages are coping differently with the different type of strategies to maintain themselves active. For example, previously we have worked in a very nice project involving several countries among Europe to take a look on the dropout data, and we identify, for example, in some countries, girls at some age maintain more time themselves in sport because of the aesthetic point of view. When you are reaching, for example, later adolescent ages, where the sport have here question about, you know, physical aspect, the question about weight, the presentation of the body, the image of the body, and so on and so on. So different ages and different sex have here a different approach to the situation. But concretely, the question is that, well, if kids, youngsters, and children are not majorly inside of the socials or inside of the sports system, how can we address this directly in school, where they are 100% of the time until the scholarity is obligatory? So that's another story, how schools will have to cope inside of this situation. So inside of this problem, I was responsible at the European Union focal point level at EPA to write down a recommendation that was published under the Luxembourg presidency in 2015, where I was able to approve with our partners, all partners at the European level, a recommendation to all schools, all countries, recommended 60 minutes per day of physical activity inside of the school, which could be included on the regular curriculum or in extra curriculum of those schools. This recommendation is in place. Some of the countries, for example, have already taken specific and concrete steps to adjust in this sense. I'm giving the example, for example, of Denmark. I'm giving the example from Hungary. Slovenia is also giving some steps, and Lithuania. But there is a recommendation that school might be a privileged space of intervention in this particular level. And of course, we need to adjust the interventions with the school community, where local organizations need to take place, need to enter, need to foster intervention in order, along with the teachers, with the curriculum, with the former curriculum, engage in specific problems inside of the school, aiming to address some of the issues that you want to transport within the sport in order to make changes and changing the game in these segments of the population. So I think that part of the answer will reside in what will be the major reply that we are going to give, including schools and the educative community on this process. Because if not, we are still talking for a small minority of the people that are somehow driven to arrive to our organizations. So we need to take a real look on this issue and to speak with a bold voice, not speaking for a small group of people. This is pilot interventions. We are no more at the moment for piloting interventions. We need the bold voice and we need the big intervention. So we need to address the majority of the people where they are and to look upon this kind of
Prendete quello che vi serve.
That's my.
Thank you so much, Paulo. I was told that we have 4 minutes left for our roundtable, so I will. There is one question here for Matthias, and so maybe we'll use these minutes for.
Sorry, Mariana. We have 4 minutes left for the conclusion.
For the conclusion of the seminar. Sorry, Alessia.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's really good to see so much interest and so many questions. I would say, since unfortunately we have time constraints, and also for the interpreters whom we want to thank anyway, I would say let's collect all questions for this roundtable and also for next speech, and we will try to respond afterwards, but we need to let our last speakers talk first. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Vanya. Thank you, Alessia. Anyway, thanks to all speakers and interesting roundtable one. We somehow didn't know that this topic will raise so many questions, but it was to be expected. Next time we will plan more time and dedicate more time to that particular topic, which is very, very important and interesting. And we know that how disastrous these effects of pandemic restrictions are for youngsters and sports in general. And we hope that experts can somehow influence the policymakers to change their stupidities. I have no other words to say on that. But anyway, we also have to consider what is the role of sport and how the sport can prevent radicalization. And this is a topic that the second roundtable is dedicated to. And I would like to present our last speakers and give the word to them, to Beppe Passo and Renato Marini, who are actually the experts on sport and sport radicalization of sports. One is teacher of physical education, Renato, and Beppe Basso is a national training coordinator and lecturer at the University of Motor Sciences in Turin. And both are specialized in athletic training and training methodology. So please, our last speakers, I'm giving the word to you.
Buongiorno a tutti, grazie. Se posso condivido lo schermo, cercherò di stare nei tempi. Ok. Si vede lo schermo?
Sì.
Sì.
Yes. Grazie, grazie della partecipazione, grazie anche ai precedenti relatori che sono stati molto interessanti e ci hanno calato in questo che l'argomento di oggi, soprattutto nell'epoca pandemica, quello che io e il collega Renato abbiamo pensato soprattutto nell'ambito del progetto Safe Zone era una nuova metodologia che potesse naturalmente includere i giovani, quelli emarginati e soprattutto per contrastare la radicalizzazione. Come hanno detto bene e hanno sottolineato molto bene i colleghi di prima, questa metodologia sarà utile anche per riportare i nostri giovani soprattutto a fare attività sportiva. La metodologia che noi abbiamo, virgolette, ideato nasce dall'esperienza che il centro sportivo italiano porta avanti da 77 anni, soprattutto nell'ambito dell'orientamento della pratica sportiva giovanile. In sintesi, la metodologia che noi intendiamo attuare nel progetto Safe Zone, ma che ripeto può essere utile anche in altri ambiti, è una metodologia inclusiva, in cui i giovani devono essere inseriti in organizzazione di attività motivanti. Cosa significa attività motivanti? Attività non solo sportive, ma giochi e soprattutto sport non tradizionale. Come diceva molto bene prima Paul Mattei, noi dobbiamo andare a prendere i giovani dove sono e soprattutto offrire loro l'attività sportiva che più gradiscono. Ecco allora che l'attività metodologica, la caratteristica della metodologia che noi abbiamo attuato è una metodologia che parte dall'inclusione e quindi le attività sportive e motorie sono soprattutto orientate anche ai giochi di ruolo, al brainstorming, all'attività di processi motori e giochi interattivi e non solo lezioni di sport. La denominazione della metodologia si chiama metodologia non formale, una metodologia che mette al centro la persona, quindi tutti gli obiettivi, le strategie organizzative, i processi di apprendimento e i metodi di valutazione sono elaborati in funzione della persona, dell'età delle persone che saranno coinvolte e soprattutto dei gruppi di pari. Altro punto focale della metodologia non formale è la praticità, cioè imparare facendo, un'educazione non formale attenta soprattutto agli aspetti concreti dell'apprendimento e soprattutto l'ambiente collaborativo. Questo è quello che dovremmo riuscire a cercare di fare attraverso questa metodologia. Oltre che sottolineare il fatto che la metodologia non formale si avvicina molto a quello che è la vita reale, il gioco e lo sport hanno in sé le caratteristiche per poter sviluppare ciò che poi avviene fuori anche dall'ambiente sportivo. Altro aspetto importante di tale metodologia è l'autovalutazione. I giovani, ma anche i meno giovani, devono essere in grado di autovalutarsi, non solo da un punto di vista fisico e quindi dei propri progressi in ambito sportivo, ma soprattutto in ambito relazionale. Sono stati sperimentati alcuni giochi, naturalmente non ci addentreremo nelle attività ludico-sportive, ma l'importante è capire il concetto. E dentro ogni gioco ci sono concetti di cooperazione, solidarietà, collaborazione soprattutto tra i pari, che è l'obiettivo del progetto, cioè l'inclusione attraverso lo sport. Lo sport rappresenta uno degli strumenti più importanti e lo rappresenta soprattutto in questo periodo pandemico che, come abbiamo visto, porterà tantissimi danni da un punto di vista fisico e mentale. E quindi l'attività sportiva, l'attività ludica, l'attività motoria, qualunque essa sia, deve essere vista anche sotto questo aspetto. Cioè non solo sotto l'aspetto agonistico, ma soprattutto sotto l'aspetto della relazione, della socializzazione, che sono elementi, come abbiamo già evidenziato stamattina, importanti proprio perché la pandemia ha diminuito le occasioni di relazione e socializzazione. Per fare questo, naturalmente, è importante il ruolo degli istruttori. Gli istruttori, gli educatori, gli allenatori rivestono un ruolo importante e fondamentale per non solo implementare questa metodologia, ma per andare insomma a prendere i giovani, come diceva prima Paul Mattei, ovunque si siano. E quindi il ruolo degli animatori e degli educatori deve essere un ruolo trainante. In sintesi e in conclusione, naturalmente, in 3 punti quelli che sono gli aspetti fondamentali dell'inclusione e della metodologia non formale, cioè la formazione degli istruttori, quindi istruttori preparati a questo ruolo, l'identificazione di attività sportiva capace di attrarre i giovani e soprattutto adatte agli obiettivi, che siano quelli di inclusione, che di socializzazione e anche obiettivi agonistici. e soprattutto la prevenzione, lo sport come strumento di inclusione e di cultura non solo sportiva, ma di valori, rispetto delle regole, insomma tutti quei valori che noi sportivi conosciamo bene e che sono inclusi nell'attività sportiva stessa. Grazie e buona ripresa a tutti.
Grazie, Giuseppe. Thank you. I hope it worked out with interpretation. It was a sound, original sound to be heard, but anyway, somehow it was understandable. And also the slides showed and the meaning of and the point of presentation. Yes, we all know that sport is a very, very effective tool in not only de-radicalization, also in enhancing health, mental health, etc., and social health. So hope we will achieve something with our roundtables. And thank you for the guests in the second roundtable to present and to share their opinion and their research with us. Thank you. Okay. I haven't seen any questions for now in chat, so.
Are there any final questions? As Warren mentioned, there are no questions in the chat. I realized today was a bit, our schedule got a bit turned around. We have one more presentation coming up.
Sì, grazie. Sono Marino Renato. Ringrazio per l'invito a questo convegno come partner del progetto sulla radicalizzazione, lo sport e la radicalizzazione. Intervengo subito dopo il mio collega Peppe Basso che ha tracciato un profilo di come intervenire in questi ambiti e lui ha trattato gli argomenti relativi all'educazione non formale. Io finisco questo convegno sulla parte che è quella ancora più pratica, sulla variabilità della pratica nell'apprendimento motore. Fino a questo momento ho sentito e si è detto come lo sport sia al tempo stesso un mezzo di formazione, educazione e barriera a fenomeni diversi. Pedro Bolgado ci ha preceduto e ha parlato di reazione e prevenzione al fenomeno della radicalizzazione e quale ruolo possa avere lo sport a riguardo. Così come Rocia e D'Arcangelo hanno parlato dell'impatto Covid e così anche Mattei. Tutti quindi trattiamo di queste decisive influenze che ha lo sport. Però molto spesso ritengo che allo sport si attribuiscono valenze e quindi una sovrastima. Perché? Perché questo però dipende comunque essenzialmente dalla modalità di somministrazione delle sue caratteristiche e componenti. Per questo desidero trattare brevemente, infine in tavola rotonda, un principio fondamentale dell'educazione, del training, della formazione, per anche più alti livelli di rendimento cognitivo motorio. E la variabilità, che cos'è la variabilità? È uno dei principi fondamentali, come anche è stato accennato dal collega che trattava portoghese, che parlava di Berkeley, la variabilità degli apprendimenti favorisce un arricchimento ampio delle strutture motorie e cognitive. E questo per un adattamento a livelli educativi più alti, complessi, che garantiscono forme di evoluzione consapevoli e auto-organizzate. E in questo caso, quindi, come bisogna, come preferibile operare? Risulta determinante le funzioni esecutive, cioè il coinvolgimento di tutte le aree della personalità attraverso le funzioni esecutive dell'osservare, percepire, inibire e attivare, pianificare, agire, valutare, sono tutte potenzialità cerebrali che hanno bisogno comunque di un apprendimento continuo e di una esercitazione a questo. E questa terminologia dell'osservare, del percepire, dell'inibire, dell'attivare, eccetera, sono azioni che conducono, secondo quello che anche ci dice Ceciliani, alla educazione alla ragione, e che è una strategia che produce effetti collaterali educativi molteplici, a partire dalla disposizione che si ha di capitale non solo umano, ma sociale, intellettuale, tecnico, fisico, emotivo, che abbia però dei contenuti che vengono passati, come complessità dei contenuti, la diversità, e qui entra il concetto della variabilità in questo momento, le novità e il sistema di scoperta a questi contenuti. E poi come questo tutto come una ricetta di cucina, tutto questo come poi si produce attraverso una modalità che è quella dell'astrazione, che stimoli le capacità di decisione, ma anche al tempo stesso di interpretare ciò che si fa del movimento come deve essere interpretato, finalizzato a delle soluzioni. Allora, in conclusione, perché voglio essere breve, preciso che quindi cosa vuole dire tutto questo? Che anche nelle modalità di studio, quale che sia lo studio fisico, motorio, cognitivo, intellettuale, il ripetere più volte lo stesso movimento, la stessa nozione, porta a risultati decisamente inizialmente immediati e buoni, ma determina poi uno stallo delle prestazioni. Quindi lo studio a un certo punto ha un momento di stasi. Cosa è consigliabile, così anche nello sport che procediamo? Praticare diversi compiti motori o cognitivi in modo anche random e vario. E questa è la cosiddetta interferenza contestuale. Dove porta questa randomizzazione delle esercitazioni? Porta a un miglioramento dell'apprendimento a lungo termine. Naturalmente occorre trovare con questo la giusta dose della miscela. Ciò risponde quindi all'occasione e all'esigenza di lavorare in maniera fantasiosa ma comunque mirata allo sviluppo delle interconnesse aree cerebrali. E tutto ciò è quindi quello che diciamo, cioè la variabilità degli stimoli, la variabilità degli apprendimenti motori per un più alto livello di rendimento cognitivo motorio. Anche questo riteniamo che sia educazione, formazione e barriera, un po' come hanno accennato all'inizio i colleghi, di un'azione, una reazione e una prevenzione a tutto quello che accade in questo momento. Grazie molto.
Grazie Renato. Thank you Renato. And please, if someone has a question. Okay, for now I don't see any questions in the chat. So again, I would like to thank all the speakers in second roundtable. But for sure, if there will be some questions, you can always point them on our website or directly to Alessia or each of us that are working on the project, and we will be happy to answer via email or on the next Transnational Seminar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Goran. I understand that there are no more questions, and we are now well over our schedule for concluding the seminar. And I would just like to remind all of you in summing up that the presentations, I understand, will be loaded on the website where they can be downloaded. Perhaps that can be reposted in the chat. And this is certainly an area that is very rich for debate and lots of discussion, and where we have a lot to do as individuals, as parents, as community members, as researchers, as athletes. And I hope that we can work together to find solutions, policy solutions, practical solutions, to get us both through this short term and long term, and reduce some of the negative effects that this has on children today. And I will end there and just remind you that there is a third seminar coming up, to which those who are interested will be invited. And unless Alessia has some final comments that she would like to conclude with, thank you all for participating. Thank you for the speakers. Thank you for your patience in dealing with these kind of scheduling changes, which made things a bit not quite so smooth as usual, but we made it through to the end. Alessia, do you have anything else you'd like to say? Otherwise, I'd like to wish everyone a good day and thank you.
I also want to thank all participants and those speakers. and the moderators of our roundtable for your interest, for your passion. And it's really good to know that there is so much interest in this topic, and particularly on the impact of this pandemic on sports. I just would like to remind all of you to please take just 2 minutes to fill out the evaluate satisfaction questionnaires. I just posted again the link. Please, since this is, as you can imagine, this is required by our funders, the European Commission. Thank you again to everybody, and thanks, Vanya. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hello.